Chapter 12. Demonstrating Skill in the Arts. Monks. One time when the prince had grown older, King Sadhana was sitting in the meeting hall together with the assembly of the Sakyas. There, some of the Sakya elders spoke to King Sadhana. Your Majesty, you know that the priests who are skilled in making predictions, as well as the gods who have definite knowledge, have foretold that if Prince Sarvastasita renounces the household, he will become a thus gone one, a worthy one, a completely perfect Buddha. Yet, if he does not renounce the household, he will become a universal monarch, a righteous Dharma king who has conquered the four quarters and is equipped with the seven treasures. The seven treasures that will be his are the precious wheel, the precious elephant, the precious horse, the precious wife, the precious jewel, the precious steward, and the precious minister. He will have 1,000 sons, all of them full, fierce warriors with well-built bodies that destroy the armies of the enemy. He will conquer the entire earth without the use of violence or weapons, and then he will rule according to the Dharma. Therefore, we must arrange a marriage for the prince. Once he is surrounded by a group of women, he will discover pleasure and not renounce the household. In that way, the line of our universal monarchy will not be cut, and we will be irreproachably respected by all the kings of the realm. King Sadhana then said to the assembly, if we are to do such a thing, then you should determine which girl would be a suitable match for the prince. One by one, 500 Sakyas each came forth and said, my daughter would be suitable for the prince. My daughter is very beautiful. My son is difficult to match, said the king, so we should ask the prince himself which girl he prefers. As everyone gathered and broached the matter with the prince, he told them, I will give you an answer in 7 days. He then thought.
I
go next.
Bernie, please. Then Zara.
I know the endless pitfalls of desire. They are the root of suffering, the right with conflict, enmity, and despair. Desire is threatening like a poisonous leaf, like fire and like the blade of a sword. Sensual objects are not alluring to me, nor am I attracted when among a crowd of women. So I ought to dwell silently in the forest, with a mind stilled by the bliss of concentrated absorption. The prince first reflected in this way, then manifesting skillful means, he considered the ripening of sentient beings and engendered intense compassion for them. Then he spoke the following verses. Lotuses thrive in filthy swamps. A king receives a veneration surrounded by a crowd of people. When a Bodhisattva attains a sizable entourage, he leads trillions of sentient beings to the deathless state. The wise Bodhisattvas who came before me, all were known to have wives, children, and harems. They were not enamored of desire nor deprived of the bliss of meditation. I too will emulate their merits. An ordinary woman lacking qualities of proper conduct and honest speech would not be suitable for me at all. Someone who pleases me, who is modest and perfectly pure in beauty, birth, family, and race would be fitting. The following verses describe her qualities. If there is a girl like that, seek her out for me. I have no use for an unabashed ordinary person. If someone has the qualities described here, seek her out for me. She should be young and beautiful, but without vanity. She should be loving like a sister, fond of renunciation. She should be generous and disciplined towards priests and ascetics. Find a girl like this for me, O Father.
She would be without pride, conceit, or hostility. She would be without deceit, jealousy, or guile, and not stray from uprightness. She should not lust after other men, even in dreams. Content with what is hers, she should lie with her husband, free from carelessness. She should not be arrogant or slothful. She should comport herself fittingly. She should be without any pride or willfulness, like a servant. She should not be attracted to alcohol, tastes, sounds, or fragrances. She should be free of greed and covetousness, satisfied with her fortune. Adhering to truth, she should be steady and unwavering, not puffed up. She should dress with modesty. Always engaging in righteousness, she should be unimpressed with flashy displays. She should always be pure in body, speech, and mind. She should not be excessively slothful or indolent, nor full of foolish pride. Circumspect, she should always be engaged in good deeds. She should regard her in-laws with the affection reserved for teachers, and be as loving to the servants and maids as she is to herself. She should be adept as the courtesan in knowing the arts of love. She should be the last to go to sleep and the first to rise. She should lovingly obey and be as guileless as a mother. Find me a father-wife like this. Monks, when King Siddhana heard these verses, he ordered his family priest, great priest, out to the city of Kapilavastu. Go to every household and scrutinize the girls. There is someone with these qualities, no matter whether she is a girl of royal caste, priestly caste, merchant caste, or servant caste. Report to us about that girl. Because the prince is not after family or caste, rather he is interested in her qualities alone. On that occasion he spoke the following verses. Whether she is a girl of royal caste or priestly caste, merchant caste or servant caste, report to me whichever girl possesses these qualities. My son is not enthralled by family or caste. His mind delights in good qualities, truth, and righteousness.
Please continue to the end of that verse.
Okay. Monks, the family priest went out to the city of Kapilavastu, carrying the written verses and wandering from house to house, looking carefully, searching for a girl with such qualities. However, he did not see such a girl. Eventually, he reached the house of Sakya Dandapani. When he entered the dwelling, he saw a beautiful, pleasant, and captivating girl. The girl had a sublimely beautiful complexion, like a white lotus, was neither too tall nor too short, neither too fat nor too thin, neither too fair nor too dark, was in her first blush of youth, and was a jewel of a woman, just as the prince had described. The girl grabbed the hold of the priest's feet and asked, "Oh, great priest, what is your aim?"
The priest said, "The son of Sudana is sublimely handsome, replete with 32 auspicious marks. He has the splendorous qualities. He has written of the qualities of a wife. Whoever has those qualities will be his bride." He then gave the girl the letter. The girl read the verses out loud, and then she revealed a smile and spoke in verse to the priest. "O priest, since I have all these suitable qualities, may this handsome and gentle prince be my husband. If he consents, there should be no delay, or I will end up with an inferior, ordinary man." The counselor went before King Suddhodana and told him what had happened. "I have seen, O king, a girl who would be suitable for the boy." The king asked, "Who does she belong to?" The counselor replied, "Your Majesty, she is the daughter of the Sakya Dandapani." King Suddhodana thought to himself, "The boy is unparalleled and inclined towards virtue. Most girls have no qualities, yet they think of themselves very highly. I will have some pleasing items made and let the boy distribute them to all the girls. I will choose for the prince whichever girl his eyes linger upon." King Suddhodana did indeed prepare some pleasing items made of gold, silver, and various jewels. Once the preparations were completed, he had the bell sounded in the city of Kapilavastu and announced the following decree. "In 7 days, the prince will give a public showing. He will give pleasing goods to the girls. So all the girls should gather together in this assembly hall at that time." Monks, after 7 days had passed, the Bodhisattva went to the assembly hall and took his seat on the splendid throne. King Suddhodana had put some spies in place and ordered them, "Report to me if the boy's eyes linger upon any particular girl."
Monks, then the girls in the city of Kapilavastu, as many as there were all, came to the assembly hall where the Bodhisattva was seated in order to see him and lay claim to the gifts being offered. Monks, then the Bodhisattva gave the pleasing items to the girls according to the order of their arrival. The girls, however, could not bear the Bodhisattva's splendor and brilliance, and as soon as they received the gifts, they quickly departed. Then the daughter of Dantapani Sakya and Sakya girl named Gopa, surrounded and escorted by an entourage of female servants, came into the assembly hall where the Bodhisattva was seated. She approached the Bodhisattva and stood to one side, staring at him with unblinking eyes. When the Bodhisattva had finished distributing all the gifts, she went up to him and with a smile on her face said to him, "O Prince, you pay no attention to me. Have I done anything inappropriate towards you?" The prince responded, "I am not ignoring you, but you certainly have come very late." He then took off his ring, which was worth several hundred of thousands of silver coins, and gave it to her. "Am I, Prince, worthy of this?" she asked. The prince replied, "Here, take all these other ornaments of mine as well." Then the girl said, "He is not right to strip the prince. It is not right to strip the prince of his adornments. Rather, we should adorn the prince." And then she left. The people who were positioned as spies came before King Suddhodana and reported the event, saying, "O king, the boy's eyes lingered upon the daughter of Dantapani Sakya, the Sakya girl named Gopa, and there was a brief conversation between them. When King Suddhodana heard this, he sent the council of priests before Dantapani Sakya with the request, "May your daughter be given to my son." Dantapani replied, "The noble boy has grown up in the palace in ease and comfort. Yet our family rule is such that a girl can only be granted to someone who is skilled in the arts, and not to a man who lacks these skills. The prince is not skilled in the arts since he did not know the maneuvers of swordsmanship, archery, combat, or wrestling. How can I give away my daughter to someone who lacks such skills?" The king was informed of this reply and thought, "This makes 2 times that I have been opposed with such a commonsensical rule. When I said, 'Why don't the Sakya boys come to attend upon my boy?' I was told, 'Why should we attend upon an indolent?' And now this." The king sat and reflected thus.
The Bodhisattva heard the story as well. He went to King Suddhodana and asked, "Your Majesty, what's wrong? Why are you sitting here so depressed?" But the king just responded, "O child, enough with your questioning." But the prince insisted, "Your Majesty, it is absolutely essential that you tell me." He asked King Suddhodana 3 times until finally the king told the Bodhisattva what was wrong. The Bodhisattva then said, "O king, is there anyone in this city who can compete with me in the arts?" King Suddhodana, with a smile on his face, asked the Bodhisattva in return, "My son, are you capable of demonstrating any athletic prowess?" The prince responded, "I surely am, your majesty. So please assemble everyone who is skilled in the arts. Then I will demonstrate my skills before them." Prince Suddhodana then asked for the bell to be sounded in the city of Kapalivastu and announced, "In 7 days, the prince will demonstrate his prowess in the arts. Then everyone skilled in the arts is to assemble here." When 7 days had passed, a group of Sakya boys, 500 strong, assembled. The daughters of King Dandapani Sakya, the Sakya girl named Gopa, was put forward as a trophy for the victor, and a pledge was sworn. Whoever here is victorious in swordsmanship, archery, combat, and wrestling shall have her. Ahead of everyone else, the boy Devadatta arrived from the city. He saw that a large white elephant was being brought to the city for the Bodhisattva to ride. Intoxicated with jealousy and drunk with pride about his Sakya family line as well as his own strength, he grabbed hold of the elephant by his trunk with his left hand and killed it with his right hand in a single stroke. Right then the boy Sundarananda arrived. Seeing that the elephant had been killed by the city gate, he asked, "Who killed it?" The crowd told him it was Devadatta. Sundarananda said, "That was not right of Devadatta." Grabbing hold of the elephant by the tail, he dragged it outside the city gates. Later, the Bodhisattva arrived riding a chariot and noticed the dead elephant. When he inquired who had killed the elephant, he was told that it was Devadatta. The Bodhisattva said, That is not good of Devadatta, who has dragged the elephant outside the city gates. When he was told that it was Sundarananda who had done so, he answered, "It was good of Sundarananda to carried it out, but this animal has a huge body. When it decays, the entire city will fill with a horrible stench." Then, while still on his chariot, the prince extended one hand to the ground, and with his big toe, he took hold of the elephant and hurled it a mile outside the city, over 7 walls and 7 moats. A deep pit formed where the elephant landed. Today, this is aptly called Elephant Gorge.
Then hundreds of thousands of gods and humans let out hundreds of thousands of cries of amazement and waved their banners. From the sky, gods called out these verses. The movement like a great elephant in rut. The Bodhisattva grabbed hold of the great elephant with his big toe and hurled it far outside the fair city, beyond 7 of the city moats. This supremely wise one will surely hurl the people who are bloated with strength of pride far beyond the city of samsara, alone through the strength of his insight. Then 500 Sakya boys emerged from the city and arrived at the place where they were to demonstrate their abilities in the arts. King Sadahana, the Sakya elders, and a big crowd also arrived there, eager to compare the differences in artistic skill between the Bodhisattva and the other Sakya boys. First, the Sakya boys, who were skilled in the rules of writing, competed with the Bodhisattva in the art of scripts. The teacher, Visvamitra, was appointed judge by the Sakyas and announced, "You are to determine who among these boys is superior, whether in penmanship or in the knowledge of scripts." Then, because the teacher Visvamitra had witnessed firsthand the Bodhisattva's knowledge of scripts, he smiled and said these verses: "This pure being has reached perfection in all the scripts, as many as there are in all the worlds, whether it be the world of humans, the world of gods, the world of demigods, the world of Gandharvas. Neither you nor I even know the names of the scripts and letters that this moon among men knows. I have witnessed it firsthand. He will be victorious."
The Sakya said, "It may indeed be that this boy is superior in knowledge of scripts, but he should also be tested and distinguish himself in knowledge of mathematics." So the greatest mathematician among the Sakyas, a man called Arjuna, an adept in knowledge of calculation, was appointed judge and told, "You are to determine who among the boys here is superior in knowledge of numbers." First, the Bodhisattva proposed a mathematical problem. One of the Sakya boys tried to calculate it, but he could not solve it. Next, another Sakya boy, then 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, up to 500 of them together tried to calculate the problems, but they could not solve it. Next, the Bodhisattva said, "Now you propose a mathematical problem, and I will calculate it." One of the Sakya boys proposed a mathematical problem to the Bodhisattva, but the boy could not confound the Bodhisattva's calculations. Next 2 of the Sakya boys, then 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 500 of them together proposed a mathematical problem, but they could not confound the Bodhisattva's calculations. Finally, the Bodhisattva said, "Enough with this dispute. All of you should convene and propose a mathematical problem for me. Then I will calculate it." Accordingly, 500 Sakya boys in unison proposed an unprecedented problem, and still the Bodhisattva calculated it without any consternation. In this way, all the Sakya boys met their match, while the Bodhisattva remained undefeated. The great mathematician Arjuna was amazed and said these verses: "When the fine intellect was questioned, his knowledge was so very quick that all 500 Sakya boys were surpassed on the path of calculation. With such insight, wisdom, intellect, and mindfulness, this ocean of knowledge, even today, learns and trains further in calculation." The whole Sakya assembly was shocked and amazed, and they all said in unison, O Prince Sarvata Sarvata Siddha, you have won. You have won. All of them stood up from their seats and with their palms joined together, homage to the Bodhisattva. Then they addressed King Suddhodana. Great King, you are so fortunate to have a son whose eloquent self-confidence is so swift, nimble, subtle, and potent in the face of questions. King Suddhodana then said to the Bodhisattva, Son, can you match the ways of calculation with the great mathematician Arjuna, an expert in the knowledge of numbers? I can, your majesty, responded the Bodhisattva. Then calculate away, commanded the king.
The great mathematician Arjuna then asked the Bodhisattva, Child, do you know how to calculate the number called 10 million to the 100th power? Yes, I do, said the Bodhisattva. How then, asked Arjuna, should one commence that calculation? The Bodhisattva replied, 100 times 10 million is called a billion, ayutta. 100 times 1 billion is called 100 billion, nayutta. 100 times 100 billion is called 1 quadrillion, kankara. 100 quadrillions is called 1 sextillion, vivara. 100 sextillions is called nonillion, exobaya. 100 nonillions is called a vivaya. 100 vivayas is called an asanga. 100 asangas is called a bahula. 100 bahulas is called a nagabala. 100 nagabalas is called a titalamba. 100 titalambas is called a vayavastana prajnapati. 100 vayavastana prajnapatis is called a hetahila. 100 hetahillas is called a karafu. 100 karafus is called a hetvindriya. 100 hetvindriyas is called a samatamlaba. 100 samatamlabas is called a ganagati. 100 ganagatis is called a niravadya. 100 niravadyas is called a mudrabala. 100 mudrabalas is called a sarvabala. 100 sarvabalas is called a vismajanagati. 100 vismajanagatis is called a sarva samjana. 100 sarva samjanas is called a vibhutamgama. 100 vibhugamas is called a talaksana. If one uses talaksana as the basic unit of calculation, it is feasible to calculate the size of Mount Meru, the king of mountains. Beyond that is the number called Dayavajaga Vati. If one uses the Dayavagarati Vati as the basic unit of calculations, it is possible to solve the calculations for all the grains of sand in the river Ganges. Beyond that is the number called Devajagara Nani Samani. Next is the number called Vahana Prajnapati. Then comes the number called Inga. Beyond that is the number called Kurutu. Then comes the number called Kurutavi. Then comes the number called Sarvana Kasepa. With this count serving as the basic unit of calculation, it is possible to calculate the number of grains of sand in 10 Ganges rivers. Beyond that is the number called Agranasara, which is the figure with this figure as the basic unit of calculation, it is possible to solve the calculation equal to the number of grains of sand in 1 billion Ganges rivers. Finally comes the number called application to the smallest particles, Paramanu Raja Prava Sanugata. With the exception of a thus gone one, a bodhisattva who dwells at the sublime seat of awakening, or the bodhisattva who is about to be initiated into all dharmas, there is no other being who understands this number, with the exception of me and perhaps one like me, namely a bodhisattva in his final existence who has departed from the household.
Then Arjuna asked, Child, how would you enumerate the number application to the smallest particles? The Bodhisattva answered, 7 of the smallest particles is 1 small particle. 7 small particles is 1 water particle. 7 water particles is 1 airborne dust particle. 7 airborne dust particles is 1 dust particle on a hair. 7 dust particles on a hair is 1 dust particle on a sheep. 7 dust particles on a sheep is 1 dust particle on a cow. 7 dust particles on a cow is 1 louse egg. 7 lice eggs is 1 mustard seed. 7 mustard seeds is 1 barley grain. 7 barley grains is 1 finger joint. 12 finger joints is 1 thumb tip to 1 index fingertip. 2 measures of 1 thumb tip up to 1 index fingertip is 1 cubit. 4 cubits is 1 bow. 1,000 bows is considered 1 earshot in Magadha. 4 times shouting distance is 1 league. Who among you knows the total number of smallest particles in a league? Nice calculation. Well, said Arjuna, I am uncertain about all this, so child. How much more so will the others, who are weaker of intellect, be confused? Child, please explain how many smallest particles make up a league. The Bodhisattva explained, a league contains 100 billion nonillions, 30 quintillions, 60 billion, 320 million, 512,000 smallest particles. Such is the sum of the smallest particles in a league. There are 7,000 leagues here in Jambudvipa, 8,000 leagues in the western continent of Godania, 9,000 leagues in the eastern continent of Videha, and 10,000 leagues in the northern continent of Kuru. Moreover, there are 1 billion worlds of 4 continents, each with this world and 1 billion oceans. There are also 1 billion surrounding mountain ranges and 1 billion outer ranges. Likewise, there are 1 billion Mount Merus, the king of mountains. There are 1 billion god realms belonging to the 4 great kings. There are 1 billion heavens of the 33, 1 billion heavens free from strife, 1 billion heavens of joy, 1 billion heavens of delighting in emanations, and 1 billion heavens of making use of others' emanations. There are 1 billion Brahma realms, 1 billion realms of high priests of Brahma, 1 billion realms of Brahma's entourage, 1 billion realms of great Brahma, 1 billion realms of limited light, 1 billion, let me see, pages stick together, 1 billion realms of limitless light, 1 billion realms of luminous heavens, 1 billion realms of heaven of limited virtue, 1 billion realms of the heaven of limitless virtue, 1 billion realms of the heaven of perfected virtue, 1 billion realms of cloudless heaven, 1 billion realms of heaven of increased merit, 1 billion realms of the heaven of great fruition, 1 billion realms of the heaven of concept-free beings, 1 billion realms of the unlofty heavens, 1 billion realms of the heaven of hardship, 1 billion realms of the sublime heaven, 1 billion realms of the gorgeous heaven, and 1 billion realms of the God of the highest heaven. This is all this is called a great trichiliocosm.
In width and breadth, each world system contains leagues measuring in the hundreds, thousands, 10 millions, billions, 100 billions, and so on, all the way up to the measure of an agra sara. There is also a corresponding measure of the smallest particle. The number of these particles can indeed be calculated, but since it's unfathomable, it's called incalculable. A number of smallest particles, even more incalculable than that, are those contained in a great trichiliocosm. When the Bodhisattva demonstrated that display of calculation, the great mathematician Arjuna and the entire assembly of Sakyas were surprised and delighted, and they felt great appreciation and joy. They each kept just a single garment for themselves and offered the remaining garments and jewelry to the Bodhisattva. Then the great mathematician Arjuna uttered the following verses. 100 times 10 million is a billion. Likewise, it is for 100 billion and 1 quadrillion. and also for a sextillion and nonillion, but beyond that is unknown to me. So in mathematics, the knowledge of the peerless one is superior. Moreover, Sakyas, if he can calculate in the duration of a single utterance of the sound hum all the deuce particles, blades of grass, forest, medicinal herbs, and drops of water in a trichocosm, then what is so amazing about the other 500 boys? When he said this, hundreds of thousands of gods and humans let out hundreds of thousands of exclamations of shock and cries and joy. From the center of the sky, gods called out the following verse. The Bodhisattva perfectly understands with a single movement of his mind all the primary and subsidiary mental states, conceptions, opinions that belong to all beings throughout 3 times without exception, whether they be inferior or superior, narrow or broad.
Monks, in this way, all the Sakya youths were defeated, and the Bodhisattva alone stood out. As the day progressed, the Bodhisattva also excelled in all aspects of leaping, swimming, and running. In the sky above, God sang these verses. With the qualities of discipline, conduct, and austerity, and the strength of his forbearance, discipline, and love, developed over millions of eons, he is a leader with a body and mind that are supple in action, and so you now witness the superiority of his swiftness. You see this most excellent being here in this city, but instantaneously he is moving throughout the 10 directions, paying homage to infinite victorious ones, with a plethora of jewels and gold in infinite worlds. Yet you are totally unaware of his comings and goings. Such is the extent of his miraculous powers. So why should his skills here provoke wonder? He is without equal, and you should feel respect for him. With his performances, the Bodhisattva uniquely distinguished himself. The Sakyas then said, the prince should also be tested in terms of his strength. At that time, the Bodhisattva stood to one side, while 500 Sakya youths wrestled among themselves. Then 32 Sakya youths stayed on to confront the Bodhisattva in a wrestling. First Nanda and Ananda approached the Bodhisattva to wrestle with him, but as soon as the Bodhisattva merely touched the 2 boys, they were unable to withstand the Bodhisattva's power and brilliance, and they collapsed on the ground. Next, Devadatta vied with the Bodhisattva. He was a conceited and arrogant young man who was bloated with pride about his strength and his relationship to the Sakya lineage. In the arena filled with spectators, Devadatta first made a round clockwise, and then he lunged at the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva, however, was calm and unhurried. He playfully seized Devadatta with his right hand, twirled him in a triple spin, and tossed him to the ground. All the while, the Bodhisattva's mind was full of love. He did not intend to hurt Devadatta, but only to break his pride. Therefore, Devadatta was unharmed. Then the Bodhisattva said, enough of this quarrel. You should now all join up and confront me in wrestling. Exhilarated, they all assailed the Bodhisattva. However, as soon as the Bodhisattva touched them, they were unable to withstand his splendor, brilliance, physical strength, and stamina. Merely by his touch, they fell to the ground. Then hundreds of thousands of gods and humans let out hundreds of thousands of exclamations of shock and cries of joy. The gods in the sky showered down a rain of flowers and called out these verses.
Even if all the myriad beings in the 10 directions came like mighty wrestlers inclined to foul play and converged on this bull among men, his mere touch would bring them to the ground. Grabbing Meru, the foremost mountain in the adamantine mountain ranges, and all other mountains throughout the 10 directions, he could reduce them all to powder. So what is so amazing about a human body with no substance? Through the strength of his love, he will vanish Mara, this mighty, foul-playing wrestler, along with his bannered forces of footmen and cavalry. Under the most excellent lord of trees, he will vanquish this fiend of darkness, this friend of darkness, and peacefully attain unexcelled awakening. In this way, the Bodhisattva fighting alone was the winner. Then Dapatani said to the Sakya youths, this has now been tested and witnessed. Next, let him demonstrate his skill in archery. First, Ananda placed an iron drum, twice shouting distance away, as his target. Next, Devadatta placed an iron drum, 4 times shouting distance away as his target. Then Sundarananda placed an iron drum 6 times shouting distance away as his target. Dattapani placed an iron drum 8 times shouting distance away as his target. Finally, the Bodhisattva placed an iron drum 10 times shouting distance away as his target. Behind the drum, he set up 7 palm trees, and beyond that, he set up an iron image of a wild boar. Ananda struck his drum target twice, Ananda struck his drum target twice, shouting distance away, but he could not shoot any farther. Devadatta struck the drum target 4 times, shouting distance away, but he also could not shoot any farther. Then Sundarananda struck the drum target 6 times, shouting distance away, but he was also unable to shoot any farther. Dandapani struck the drum target 8 times, shouting distance away, and pierced it, but he could also not shoot any farther.
I'm sorry. However, whatever bow the Bodhisattva drew, the string snapped or the bow broke. So the Bodhisattva asked, King, is there any other bow here in the city that I can string or can withstand my physical strength? Yes, son, there is, replied the king. Where is it? Asked the boy. Son, the king answered, your grandfather was called Simhahanu. He had a bow that is now being honored in the temple with incense and flower garlands. No one since him has been able to string the bow, let alone draw it. The Bodhisattva said, Your Majesty, may the bow be brought here. I would like to test it. When the bow was brought to the assembly, all the Sakya youths tried pulling the bow with all their strength, but they were unable to string it, let alone draw it. Then the bow was placed before the Sakya Dandapani, who mustered all his bodily strength and endurance and tried to string the bow, but could not. Finally, the bow was placed before the Bodhisattva. He picked it up and sitting on his seat in a cross-legged position, he held it with his left hand and strung it with a single fingertip of his right hand. When he was stringing the bow, a sound resonated through the entire city of Kapalivastu. All the townspeople became agitated and asked one another where the sound was coming from. Some said the sound is surely from Prince Sarvata city, who has strung his grandfather's bow. Then hundreds of thousands of gods and humans let out hundreds of thousands of exclamations of shock and cries of joy. The kings in the sky had addressed the verse to King Suddhodana and to the masses. Just as this bow was drawn by the sage without rising from his seat, so will he undoubtedly fulfill his purpose and conquer the armies of Mara with ease. Monks, the Bodhisattva now picked up an arrow, drew the bow, and released the arrow. His shot was so powerful that the arrow went right through the targets set up by Ananda, Devadatta, Sundarananda, and Dandapani. The bow then cleaved his own iron drum target, which was 10 times shouting distance away, then pierced the 7 palm trees and the iron image of a boar before it finally entered the ground and disappeared. Then there in the area where the arrow pierced the ground and vanished, a crater formed, which is still to this day called the Arrow Crater. Then the hundreds of thousands of gods and humans let out hundreds of thousands of exclamations of surprise and cries of joy. The entire assembly of Sakyas was shocked and astonished. They said, how amazing. he has such expertise in the arts without even having trained.
The gods in the sky then called out to King Siddhana and the masses, "O people, why be so amazed? Do you know what's amazing? You will sit on this earth on the seat of the previous awakened ones. Holding the bow of calm abiding, he will shoot the arrows of empty lack of self, and so destroy the enemies, the afflictions, rend asunder the net of views, and attain sublime awakening, tranquil, stainless, and free from sorrow." Having spoken thus, the gods approached the Bodhisattva, strewing them with divine flowers. In this way, the Bodhisattva was superior in all the main aspects of the mundane arts, as well as in all practice beyond the reach of gods and humans. It was superior in leaping and likewise in writing, finger counting, computation, arithmetic, wrestling, archery, running, rowing, swimming, elephant mounting, horsemanship, carriage driving, bow and arrow skills, balance and strength, heroics, gymnastics, elephant driving, lassoing, rising, advancing, retreating, gripping with the hand, grasping using the foot, gripping using the top of the head, cutting, cleaving, breaking, rubbing, target shooting without causing injury, target shooting at vital points, target shooting through only hearing the target, striking hard, playing dice, poetry composition, prose composition, painting, drama, dramatic action, tactile analysis, attending the sacred fire, playing the lute, playing other musical instruments, dancing, singing, chanting, storytelling, comedy, dancing to music, dramatic dancing, mimicry, garland, stringing, cooling with a fan, dyeing precious gems, dyeing cloths, creating optical illusions, dream analysis, bird sounds, analysis of women, analysis of men, analysis of horses, analysis of elephants, analysis of cattle, analysis of goats, analysis of sheep, analysis of dogs, ritual science and its related lexicon, revealed scripture, ancient stories, history, the Vedas, grammar, etymologies, phonetics, metrics, and composition, rules for conducting rituals, astrology, the Samkhya philosophical system, the Yoga philosophical system, ceremonies, the art of courtesans, the Vaisesika philosophical system, economics, ethics, hydraulics, knowledge of demigods, knowledge of game animals, knowledge of bird sounds, logic, hydromechanics, beeswax crafts, sewing, wicker work, leaf cutting, and perfume making. When that became clear, the Sakya Dandapani decided to give away his daughter, the Sakya girl Gopa, to the Bodhisattva. King Sudahana also formally requested her hand in marriage for the Bodhisattva. Then indeed, in order to conform worldly conventions, the Bodhisattva dwelt among 84,000 women and showed himself to partake of the amorous games with pleasure. Among the 84,000 women, the Sakya girl Gopa was consecrated as the foremost wife. However, no matter who the Sakya girl Gopa encountered, whether it was her mother-in-law, her father-in-law, or any other member of the inner quarters, she did not cover her face. So people criticized her and spoke badly for saying a new wife is supposed to be covered, but this one is always exposed.
The Sakya girl Gopa heard this rumor, and in front of all the folk of the inner quarters, she said these verses. A noble being shines when uncovered, whether sitting, standing, or walking, like a precious gem beaming, radiant on the pinnacle of a standard. While going, a noble being shines, and likewise, while coming, a noble being shines. While rising or sitting, a noble being always shines. A noble being shines when speaking, and even when silent, a noble being shines, and like a nightingale does whenever seen or heard. Whether he wears clothes made of kusha grass, poor quality clothes, or his body is emaciated, one who is replete with good qualities and is adorned by those qualities shines with his own radiance. A noble one without evil shines perpetually, whereas an immature being who commits evil never shines no matter what he wears. Those who have evil in their hearts, but whose speech is sweet, are like a jar of poison topped off with nectar. Like a rocky stone, rough to the touch, they are hard inside. Being with them is like caressing a viper's head. The truly gentle are approached and honored by all, just like sacred bathing bank, which sustains everyone. Noble beings are like a jar filled with milk and curd. It is extremely auspicious to behold such a pure nature.
Those who have long shunned evil companions, who are now surrounded by precious spiritual friends, who relinquish evil deeds and adhere to the teachings of the Buddhas, are fruitfully auspicious to behold. Those who control their bodies thus control all physical faults. Those who control their speech never confuse their words. Those with guarded senses are mentally composed and serene. What good is it to cover the face of such beings? Others may be covered in 1,000 garments, but if their minds are revealed to lack shame and modesty, and if they have no good qualities and lack truthful speech, then they move through the world more naked than naked. There are those who conceal their mind and restrain their senses, who are satisfied with their husbands and do not pine after others. When they shine unconcealed like the sun and moon, what good is it to cover their faces? Furthermore, the great sages, those who know the thoughts of others, and the assemblies of gods all know my thoughts. They know my discipline, qualities, restraint, and carefulness, so why should I veil my face? Monks, when King Siddhartha heard these eloquent verses from the Sakya girl Gopa, he felt satisfied and happy, and he cheerfully rejoiced. He then offered her a pair of fine cotton fabrics that were set with many different types of jewels, a pearl necklace worth 100 billion silver coins, and a garland of gold set with red pearls. The king then offered this sentiment. Just as my son is adorned with good qualities, his bride too is radiant with her own good qualities. That these two pristine beings have come together is just like butter and clarified butter. This concludes the 12th chapter on demonstrating skills in the arts.
Well, very good. Congratulations to you guys, Kunga and to Bernie. You had the hardest ones to do. I was sweating that I would have to do them. But you did them masterfully. Kunga, that was really good.
A lot of syllables.
He definitely had the hardest section, the numbers.
Yes, that was incredible.
It's like a mantra recitation.
It really was. You did a great job.
Yeah. Well, my eyes, I can't separate those syllables in one long word like that. I have trouble with that. Well, that was very good. But nevertheless, the story of the Bodhisattva here is magnificent, isn't it?
It's a little over the top, but other than that, it's a fun story. It's
Well,
a fun
he's over
story.
the top. Why not? He's over the top.
He's over the top.
He's
Anyone
over the
who
top.
can toss an elephant with his big toe is quite a man.
Yes. Well, I think it's lovely, and it's great because the stories that I've heard over the years, and even the story that I tell. I've got this 2-hour little presentation I can do, the life of the Buddha, and it's the references are all here. They might be in a little different order and a different way of speaking about them, but it's all here. So I'm very happy about that. There weren't any ringers thrown in. But he was quite a, if anybody knew that he could do all that with the calculations and everything, it'd be like Rain Man, in the movie Rain Man, when he can, the autistic character who could, figure out numbers, no problem at all.
Yeah, that was just hilarious that his father didn't know that too. I was kind of perplexed at that as well.
Yeah.
What, his father didn't know how wise he was, how smart he was?
Just like his kid could do all the stuff. Like it's like kind of like he didn't know his kid was, I don't know, like hadn't seen his kid at all for like 20 years or something, like in action.
Right.
I don't know. It was an interesting gap for me. However, I recognize it's translation.
Well, the stories I always heard was that, during the years that he was in the palace, when he was a young boy and everything, he was being trained. He had teachers, he had mentors, and he had tutors and so on like that. And he was a great, great student. Here it's just implying that he naturally had all this wisdom, all this ability.
Lance, how old is he supposed to be in this chapter and that part of it?
Well, in the stories that I know, he would have been like 13 years old, because at that time, that was the age that many children were being married, particularly of the nobility.
Okay.
Because many of them, to live to be 30 years old or 40 years old was a long time.
Right. Okay.
There was wars, there were battles that they had, not to mention diseases and so on. So there was a lot that they, to take their lives before they reached an age like, we know, 60, 70, 80 years old.
Okay. Well, let me try to figure this out. Let me calculate this backwards. I don't know if this is correct, but Buddha became enlightened, left home when he was 29 years old, right? And he meditated for 6 years before he became the Buddha at 35.
Right.
And when he became enlightened, he returned to his homeland. And when he returned to his homeland, he made his son a novice monk.
Well, I think the stories that I heard that came later.
Yeah, well, it can't be that much later, because when his son became a novice monk, I believe he was 10 years old.
Well, yeah, that makes sense.
So his son was then born 6
So when he left,
years.
his son was already born. When he left at 20
Yeah, of course, he
years
would have
old,
to be born.
his son was already born.
Yeah, but so 10 years old, and so that was 4 years before he left home. So assuming that
What was 4 years before he left home?
that his son was born, because he was 10 years old.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know, but I thought it was, he was still an infant.
Maybe. So let's say he was an infant, and when he left home, then he was 29
Right.
or 28 when his son was born.
Well, maybe.
And that means his wife got pregnant when she was 27, which is a long time between.
Well, that's right, and that was an issue. Yes.
So is there any explanation for that? Because typically, if they were married and
Well, it was great disappointment, in the palace, because she hadn't conceived.
oh, okay. I
So
don't
there was
remember
great
that.
disappointment, but there was great joy when she did become pregnant.
So there was a long gap between.
There was a long gap.
Okay, I hadn't heard that part of the story.
Yeah, that's the way I understood it.
Yeah, okay.
And that he left. You see the baby boy was an infant, and he knew that if he didn't leave when he did, that his emotions were going to arise, and he was going to have to remain in the palace and become a universal monarch. And he knew that he had to leave at that time, otherwise he would have been, emotionally connected, and he wouldn't be able to leave after that.
So yeah. So what was the other part of the story? Of course, he was raised by his aunt.
Right.
And not because his mother had died shortly after he was born.
Right.
So and his aunt was actually the mother of Devadatta, if I recall correctly. So
his aunt was?
His aunt who raised him was
Devadatta's mother?
I believe so. I might be wrong.
Well, so I never heard that, but I knew that I read that Devadatta was his cousin. So that's
his cousin, yes.
So that could certainly make sense.
And Ananda, I believe, was born the day that Buddha left is traditionally the day the Buddha left the palace. So that would
Ananda
make
was born. Say that
Ananda
again?
also also a
Ananda, who became his disciple.
Ananda, who became his sort of I don't know what the right word, attendant, I guess is the right word. Yeah. He's
Oh,
also
the one who he took that took him outside the palace and so on.
no, that was the charioteer who took him outside the palace, right?
Yeah, well, you see, that's the difference in the stories that I heard.
Yeah.
You know that the stories I heard that he went out 3 different times, and the fourth
Oh,
time was the time that he stayed.
yeah, charioteer. Yeah, and of course, I mean, the final time he left the palace, also the
Right.
charioteer took him out. So, and anyway, I'm just babbling. I don't know that this has any
It's
relevance to this
interesting, you
chapter.
know. It's just interesting, you know. And
I'm trying to remember.
Her name Gopa, and in Hindu, I mean, that's a common name for a female, a gopi. You know,
Right,
Krishna's
right.
consort or girlfriends were gopis.
Well, I believe it's related to the Sanskrit or word for cow as well. So,
Oh, really? Well, I didn't know that.
so well,
Yeah,
uh,
but in the other stories that I knew, that her name was Yasodhara.
Yasudhara, right? Yeah, maybe she had a different name after she got married. Maybe they give her a different name as a title.
I don't know.
So, I mean, the other interesting thing to me was the different fields of study. They sort of give you a list of all the things that he'd mastered.
Yes.
It gives you an idea of what they considered the different fields of study at the time. Well,
Yeah,
everything,
you're talking about 12.65?
yeah, 12.65, this long list of
Yeah, he could do
subjects.
everything.
Well, some of them are rather strange, like dyeing precious gems. How do you dye a precious gem? And the analysis of animals. I guess that's sort of veterinary, I suppose. And astrology, he studied astrology, of course, and knowledge of bird sounds. Suppose that's good if you're hunting. So, beeswax crafts, right? Leaf cutting. Uh, and, interesting because at least in the West, some of these would be considered feminine skills like perfume, well, maybe not perfume making, but sewing and wicker work would typically be considered women's skills. But here, the Bodhisattva has them as well.
And maybe that was the point, to be able to show that, you know, he was, you know, above the dualism of the gender. You
Maybe,
know, and
maybe the studies weren't gendered back at the time either. I mean, everybody shouldn't. Well, back in that time, it just would be a practical skill knowing how to sew. Things get ripped; they need to be sewed up. So,
Gunga, what do you think about any of this? You know, you're read well. What do you think about this?
So I don't read this as a document that's trying to be a historical um, story of what the Buddha's life. I read it more as uh, a text which is trying to help you to see or help you to experience something that's beyond thinking about. So we talk about the idea the that the see there's the three bodies of the Buddha. There's the one body of the Buddha, Dharmakaya, you can't speak about, right? You can't define it, you can't explain it in words. So I think of these stories as another way to enter that us getting into the details of what was going on, how old he was and how he could do that and how he couldn't do that. I don't think that, for me, that's not the point. For me, the point is to trying to get to that state of mind that things are unexplainable. Trying to communicate things that are unexplainable. So I feel like when he talks about these great counting skills and these numbers that are beyond any numbers that we have ever heard before, it kind of speaks to that idea of talking about things that can't be conceptualized. When he's talking about the Buddha throwing the elephant with his toe over 7, he's just talking about something that's very difficult to imagine, something beyond imagination.
It was all superhuman, really.
Yeah, so not even, and just think of it, that's the way I kind of think of it, and I think about the reading of it becomes like a recitation, like a mantra recitation. You're not supposed to be looking at this in a way that judges whether this is correct or not correct, or whether this is an exaggeration or why they were exaggerating it. Just read it and receive it, and not think too much about it. I don't think it's supposed to be conceptualized about. It makes me keep thinking of from the Shin Shin Ming, don't waste your time in arguments and discussion attempting to grasp the ungraspable. All things reveal the one manifest as all things. So that's sort of how I come at this. That's
Yeah, well, I think that's good. I think you're right, and but I think that there is but they're trying to establish a practicality and a culture from which he comes. So I think part of the story is setting that, is telling us that, what the stage was that he was growing up in. And the spirituality of it comes later, and even that isn't talked about too much. This playing full ends with the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma. So that'll be interesting. If you got book 1 handy, you look at the table of contents and you can see, what's coming up and so on. And it's interesting, to see his development. But I agree that, all this, where does truth end or truth begin and myth end? It's, in 2,600 years, things are going to get twisted, even in a couple hundred years, things are going to get twisted. And they would have, Bernie could probably speak to this much better than I can, but they had 3 councils or 4 councils where, like every generation after the Buddha had passed, that the main monks would come together and they would have these councils and agree upon what was going to be taught, how it was going to be taught, what Buddhism was to be going forward from that time. So they were taking their interpretations, they were voiced, because nothing was written down for at least 200 years. They were just stories that were being told. So, and they started getting, I imagine, skewed in one way or another. What do you think about that, Bernie?
Well, okay, as far as the Buddhist councils go, the first council was right after the Buddha's parinirvana, and it was to settle what the Buddhist scriptures were, and
but they weren't. But that was. I thought they weren't written down for another couple hundred years.
They weren't written down, but what they did is that Ananda recited what he remembered or what he heard from the Buddha, and he had the other monks recite them as well until they had memorized them. And also there was another monk who remembered all the Vinaya. What's his name? Begins with a S, not Subhuti, but Suddhodana, maybe? No say. I don't know. But anyway, so there were 2 two people who recited the Vinaya and the Sutras, which was, 2/3 of the Buddhist scripture at the time. Now, the second council, and I believe the third council, were just to settle rather obscure disagreements about what the Vinaya rules were, like how late you could eat your meal in the morning, because they were supposed to fast in the afternoon. And supposedly it has to do with the length of the shadow on the ground afternoon. And it's rather small points like that that weren't very serious. So really the only really terribly important council was the first. But even with the councils, the Buddhists split into 18 different sects or whatever, schools, whatever you want to call them, based on small differences in doctrine. So there were different schools of what's now considered the Hinayana at the time.
So it wasn't until the time of Nagarjuna, which was what, about 300 years or so after the Buddha passed, right?
Sometime after Ashoka,
It was
yes.
300 or 400 years.
Sometime,
I think 200 AD is
it's either shortly before or shortly after the birth of Christ. Nagarjuna was living. I don't think they have an exact date.
Well, my point in bringing it up is that was, that was, when the Mahayana was kind of being codified.
Well, yeah, supposedly he received the Prajnaparamita Sutras from the Nagas. And so he
Nagarjuna did.
Nagarjuna, that's how
that's how he gets his name.
That's how he got his name.
Naga.
Like the Nagas had preserved the Mahayana, the Prajnaparamita Sutras in their realm, and they returned them to him. And he wrote, of course, his commentary on emptiness based on the Prajnaparamita Sutras. So, yeah, there was supposedly another council called by a king Kanishka, but I don't remember any details about what was discussed in that council. I'd have to look it up online. Kanishka was not a native Indian. It was a sort of barbarian or non-Indian people who invaded the northwest of India, which is now Pakistan, and established a kingdom. And Kanishka was their greatest king, and he called a council of Buddhist monks to settle some points, but I don't recall what they were.
So Nagarjuna, the dates I've got here was, approximately 150 to 250 in the Common Era.
Really, that late? That late?
That's what I got here.
Okay, I suppose the scholars are changing that in all the time, but I heard it was anywhere from 100 BC to 100 AD. But
Muskoka was 232 BC.
Yeah, so
But the point I wanted to make was that it was during that time of Nagarjuna and Chandrakika and all them, that was the intellectual discussions, to put it nicely, of what the Madhyamaka was. And that was trying to be all sussed out, and they're arguing, they were discussing, the very fine details of, how many monks you could put on the tip of a pin or something like that, But so before that, it was, I assume it was more, discussion about the Vinaya and the Hinayana and establishing the discipline and the structure and everything. But although the Buddha taught the Mahayana while he was alive, it wasn't really elucidated until Nagarjuna. And then it became a topic of conversation between all the scholars.
Yeah, well, it's a disputed question of the origins of the Mahayana and such, but certainly he was the first great philosopher of the Mahayana, that's for sure.
Kunga, you got any comment?
No, I was just looking at my this is a part of my lineage chant, and I'm just marking down here when Nagarjuna, what one of the time periods for him. There's got from Shakyamuni Buddha, Mahakashyapa, Ananda, Sanakavasha, Upagupta, Dirtaka, Machaka, Vasumitra, Buddhanandi, Buddhamitra, Parshva, Punyashash, Ashvagosa, Kapamala, and then Nagarjuna. In my tradition, that's how we've traced the lineage from Shakyamuni to Nagarjuna. So just looking at that and thinking about that.
Well, just as a slight aside, you know that Jigden Sumgun, Lord Jigden Sumgun, who is the founder of the Drikung Kagyu lineage, the lineage that we are part of, he's considered to be, at least in the Kagyu tradition, that he is the incarnation of the second Nagarjuna.
Where does the so right, but is he in line with Nagarjuna? Or is there several teachers and then you get to that teacher?
Oh, there was 800 years or 600 years between them.
He's just considered the
That could be 10
reincarnation of
teachers.
Nagarjuna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a story about, what was it, Nagarjuna was supposedly discovered the secret of immortality,
Oh,
and
I haven't heard that.
that he wouldn't die. He had a friend who was a prince, and he said the prince would not, the king would not die. He was a king. King would not die before Nagarjuna died. So I don't know. I'm telling these stupid stories I half remember. And somehow the Nagarjuna could only die one way, and that's to have his neck cut by a piece of kusha grass. And the reason why is that in a previous life, he committed the bad karma of cutting off a grasshopper's head with a piece of kusha grass. So he had to repay that by having his own head chopped off by a piece of kusha grass. So that's how I remember the story anyway.
Well, let me bring Zara into the conversation.
Yeah.
And ask Zara, we're talking about, these finer points of the dates and scholarly stuff is, and for me, my ability to do that is minuscule, So, but more to what Kunga was saying, what the spiritual value of all this was, How does this land on you, Zara? Because you're probably hearing this, for the first time, or maybe you've just heard some stories about it. What's the most important thing to you? Is it what is the cultural Buddhism, or is it the spiritual Buddhism?
My first comment is similar. I try not to chuckle when I see Bernie like non-verbally having his moments of sarcasm with some of the embellishment. I'm trying my best not to be distracted by. I have an intellectual unease right now. I'm too easily intellectually distracted at some of the embellishment. That's my honest first response to you. So I'm kind of like, this can't be real. And then listening to Kunga was really helpful about, he's just like, it's just trying to show like, hey, this guy was just really, this soul or this person was just extraordinary. That's really the point of all of it.
He was a what? I didn't hear that word. Those words.
Tremendously extraordinary. Meaning like the overemphasis and the translation is that it's just showing like he was clearly, it was easy to discriminate and delineate like, yeah, he's like an alien. And so I think that's probably what I'm leaning towards in relation to my takeaway from all of this is that that's really what, in reading all this, even from, where we started months ago, like his birth and all those components is like just recognizing it's once you can get past all of the icing and stuff, it's just really about the extraordinary aspect of how he's come in to help human beings and save people from their egos, basically. So that's sort of, and I don't know if that would mean, I guess that's more the spiritual component, which to answer your question more directly, I think that's what I'm taking away from it. Yeah.
Comparing it to other traditions, whether it's Christianity or it's Judaism or it's Islam or it's Taoism or Hinduism or whatever, the heroes of the time, were made to be, were to be these superhuman kind of beings, and so the narratives developed around them. I've heard it said that, well, maybe Jesus as a man didn't live. He was a composite of several people of the Gnostic people of the time. That lived for 400 years or so. The Gnostics were around for 400 years before they died out, and he became this composite of that. And maybe, Buddha or whatever, any of these other stories could be similar to that. What do you think of that? Just the fact that these are super human beings who were created after they died and embellished, and so on to be made into these, incredibly powerful beings.
I can
The storytelling, like kind of what Bernie was saying, it took 200 years before there was a written narrative. Is that what you mean? Like the passing down of like a game of telephone?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of course things are embellished. Yeah. Sorry, Kung, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's all right. Um, so I guess for our audience, our current audience, that there's limited value for me as a 20th century person to try and see this from a perspective of someone who's looking at the Buddha as like a godlike being, and the reason he was able to discover and teach these truths was because of these divine aspects. It's really difficult for me to relate to that literal interpretation. For me, really, the only way into the sutra is this idea that the truth can't be reached through thinking about it. And this is just another way to go beyond thinking about something, to make it so difficult to conceptualize that it kind of resists conceptualizing it. You could blow it off as just a bunch of elaborations or folk stories, but then you can do that, then you just won't get anything out of it. But in order for me to actually get something out of it, I really have to put that judgment mind aside, turn that off, and just receive the story without trying to evaluate it all the time, which is really good practice, right? I think the Buddha talks about doing that all the time, just to receive reality, appreciate the thusness of reality without putting it into a category, true or false, right or wrong, happened, didn't happen. Just see what's actually there. Just read the story. Don't evaluate it, criticize it, just read the story. Thank you.
I think that what we're reading now, the play in full, is written by people 200-300 years after the Buddha passed, to be able to have a scripture of what it was, what that culture was, and so on like that. But then there's other sutras that, it'd be great to be able to get to in our lifetime, where the Buddha is teaching on Vulture Creek Mountain. What was it called? Vulture Creek Peak or something like that. And this is when he goes into his deep meditations and he begins to channel, these Maitreya or Manjushri and so on like that. And he's teaching through that. And this is when he gets very, I don't know if the mystical is the right word to say, but it becomes the basis of understanding, what the Dharma is and how deep it is and how it's able to be relevant to us today, 2,600 years later, because of what, he was talking about that kind of stuff then, and we're still trying to figure it out here, and it's universal, and it goes to your point that it's beyond our rational comprehension or rational conceptualization of it. But yet, it is something to be experienced. And that's the thing that keeps it alive, that there's people who continually go through this process, are inspired, by the stories and so on like that, but then have these profound experiences themselves. Not that they can then explain it any better, but that they validate, oh yeah, this is true. What do you think of that, Bernie?
As usual, I agree with you, Lance. So, I could say it a little bit differently, but I basically agree with what you say. So,
Kongo, what do you think?
Even the sutras that are taught on Vulture Peak, that take place on Vulture Peak, have in my experience with the ones that I've read, like some of them, like the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, they have this, the Flower Garland Sutra, they have this feeling that's very much communicated in this sutra. The same type of language and enumeration upon enumeration, like when you did with the counting, that kind of thing goes throughout, those sutras. So this very much feels like me part of that sutra, even though his kind of the story, the origin story is very much using that same perspective, that are in those other sutras, like seeing this, like, you have this one person, and in this one person we see all activities of all people, like every skill, every strength, every interest that anyone could ever have, the Buddha has. It's like all right there. Everything is right there. It's all just like enumerated in these really long lists. And that's something that I see in those other sutras taught in Vulture Peak. Like when they talk about any certain like paramita, like one of the wisdoms or any type of practice, they'll like find like every single practice within that practice becomes like these long lists of everything sort of coming together and being interconnected. And I just kind of see that like it's like a reflection of an Indra's net, where all the different jewels are hanging down, and every single jewel reflects all the other jewels. So every little point of the Buddha's life reflects every part of everybody's life. It's all gets all reflected back in there. So thank you.
Yeah, so isn't that the point, to be able to see that we are indistinguishable from all this phenomenal nature? Is just a display of that, and that non-conceptuality is the seminal point from which this all comes, that we can't define.
Yeah.
But yet we have all this potential, and the problem becomes, do we get lost in the potential? Does the ego take over and we get lost in trying to be this, that, and the other thing, to the point of losing that non-conceptuality? because the non-conceptuality is really the beautiful part, is really the essence part, is the bliss part. What do you
Well,
think about that?
well, bliss is overrated. Bliss is important, but it's,
Really?
yeah, it is actually. Bliss can be an obstacle. Bliss can be an obstacle. It's good because it keeps you practicing, but at a certain point, you got to. I mean, the goal is an understanding of emptiness and compassion. That's
But
bliss
that
is just
yields the bliss.
uh it, well, yeah, it's a difficult subject. Now, the bliss that most people experience in meditation is I forget the exact term for it, but it's a byproduct of meditation and it's not the goal. Uh,
Well, there's a
bliss,
superficial
bliss,
bliss.
clarity, and non-thought is what they call the three. I can't remember the right word right now
Well, that
for the.
becomes like a pridefulness of it all, and
Yeah, it becomes an obstacle if you're attached to it. That's what
becomes
it
a sign.
becomes.
Yes,
Yeah, it's you can
and
become too
The
attached.
Mahamudra is all about letting that go.
Well, Mahamudra really is to see the emptiness of the bliss. You see, when you see the emptiness of the bliss of meditation, then you see the emptiness of every sort of pleasure everywhere, because it really they all really have the same nature.
And
And at
that
that point,
and that's the point. And
and
that
yeah, and at that point you transcend it.
and not
But
to get hung up on anything, to be free.
yeah, but yeah, certainly as a beginner, it's certainly very helpful and validating to get feelings of bliss out of your meditation, but you've got to understand that's just a signpost on the way and not the goal.
Zara, what comment do you have?
I'm just listening to everyone. All three of you are bringing up good points, and I'm just because of where I am right now on my own journey, I experience moments of, I guess, bliss, and yeah, you're right. Bernie's right. Like if you get caught up in that in and of itself, you can get attached to that as well, and wanting to be in that state. Um, and the comments you made earlier, Lance, about think. I'm just everything is the same to me now, and like basically everything is one. Like if your back hurts, my back hurts, right? Everything, or if I kill a yellow jacket, it's like everything is the same to me. It's all the same energy source. If I kill a yellow jacket, or if I'm seeing an ant and I intentionally kill it, like when I'm doing a yoga posture on the ground, like I'm like, that's the same energy source, right? It's all the same thing. So I'm in this weird phase right now, digesting all of it and doing like this spiritual transformation process. And like, I would say I'm in a highly sensitive stage right now of transformation, um, in discerning right action. And also,
Are you dealing with stability?
what does that mean?
Well, to have this degree of awareness, you know, you're aware of all these possibilities, all these things, and so on, but yet to have a ground, a stability, and a ground of what it is to be spiritual in the beginning, in the first place,
Mm.
and that you can go off on all these trips, but still know that you're connected in a way that permeates everything else,
Mm.
and that you can go off and do those things, but you don't have to get lost in those things.
Mm.
And it's important to have the lineage. It's important to have the Dharma to be able to keep you grounded in that experience of non-conceptuality, because it's so subtle. If we lose it, then the ego takes over, and then we start getting lost in all those possibilities. And that's it's a natural thing for human beings to do that.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it's a once you make this transition, it's almost every thought you have to do a self-analysis of because the
Otherwise, why would Kunga continue to do this? I mean, he's been exposed to a lot of things. Bernie been exposed to a lot of things. I've been exposed to a couple things myself, and you have too. But why do we keep coming back to this? Is because maybe we're just not stable enough to be able to be without it. We're not the embodiment of it quite yet.
um yeah, in the last, so this has actually happened recently, and like I have a craving now to just be with spiritual teachings, whether it's the Gita, the book you sent me, like I just want to get back there. Like I was trying to watch The Matrix, whatever, the 2021 with Keanu Reeves. I always liked The Matrix because it was so woo-woo. And it's interesting, your soul and ego starts this battle with you. And I realized, oh, I kept fidgeting. I'm like, it's because your spirit doesn't want you to watch this, right? Like I was like, you're not paying attention. Like I'd rather just go back and read a book, right? Spirit, like, or watch the sunset. 5 years ago, that would have been an easy, just lounge on the couch and put a blanket on and chill for the rest of the night. And now it was almost painful, like so uncomfortable, like I was getting bee stings, right? Like it
You
was like
mean
get up.
to be watching The Matrix?
Yeah, just to watch any movie. It's like I have to burn incense or something or light a candle. But like that just happened naturally, right? Where it's now like it's almost what I'm craving is spiritual material without forcing it. And I think the thing most people don't understand, at least I didn't, this is a marathon, this is Iron Man, and that it really takes years of consistency and constancy to get to a place where it's like tying a shoelace. I can see like if you don't make a commitment or don't have the like even habits of even dedication of like I think it's good for some people, like can you train for a marathon, right? Can you train for something that requires any level of discipline before you get to spiritual training, right? Like something easy, right? Like those would be questions I would ask people, like can you do this X, Y, or Z as a prerequisite? Because once you get to spiritual stuff, all this stuff starts on layering, and most people are like I gotta dip out of this, I can't deal with this, like I need to go live in delusion.
What do you think? And I like to hear what Kunga and Bernie have to say, but what do you think of, birth and death are just concepts.
Yeah, they
And
are.
we're seeing it from a very myopic point of view.
Yeah, we are 100%. Lance, people
Did
cannot.
you did you know that before?
No, I mean, I grew up in the Abrahamic mindset of, you died, God's going to talk to you, talk about all the stuff you've done, and then, whip you on the butternut, and then you go up to heaven or wherever else. Now I understand. Everything's so fluid now. I'm like, I'm not afraid of death. And here's what I now understand is I get why people don't want to go to nirvana. I get it. It is way more seductive and attractive to hang on to this body, to hang up on, to stay on the play, to stay on the stage.
It's much easier.
It's easier, and I think it's just scary to be like, like what am I gonna do with all my downtime, right? Up in nirvana, right? Like I need conflict and chaos. I need someone to be mad at, and that's the
Need an
ego.
identity. Yeah.
Yeah, I need an identity. I need divisiveness. And that's the ego. I think you've said this, people can't stand that type of liberation and freedom. You can't go back to source energy and one collective consciousness. You have to be your separate self, which is just fundamentally the ego. That's it.
Well, we don't have much time, but Congo, Bernie, do you have any comment on, birth and death just as concept? And
Well,
we're seeing it from this myopic point of view.
it's well, it's a difficult subject because when you say something is just a concept, that the fact is, if you die, you're dead.
Well, what's dead?
Well, you can approach it that way, but still, It's you can't deny cause and effect just by saying something's a concept. So
Do you mean karma, or do you mean when you say cause and effect, you mean karma?
karma, not just karma, but all cause and effect. If you stick your hand in a fire, it's going to burn. And you can't say, oh, well, getting burnt is just a concept. Well, at a certain level, sure, but at a certain level, you got to respect the fire as well. I mean, you got to take care of this life. You got this life, you got to take care of it. You can't say, oh, it's just a concept. Doesn't matter if I live or die. You got this life, you got to care for it.
Gunga, what would you say? We only have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have that meditation about the precious human life and how it's important to use the time we have here meaningfully. And we can talk about birth and death as concepts, and we talk about that. When does birth start? We have different ideas about abortion based on that. But I think in the supreme view, we would say that birth started at the beginning of the universe. It's made birth has always been. It's never started. This never ends. Death never comes either. But physically, as human beings, we have people in our family who are no longer with us physically, so we know there's a physical death side to that death. Um, but I think that the teachings that interest me are the teachings that say that at the less attached we can become to this idea of our separate ego and our own physical body, the more freedom we can have in our life, freedom from this fear of death, freedom from the delusion that we're a separate being, not interconnected with everyone else. I think the more you are able to experience that interconnectedness, then that idea of what death is, how you experience death, really changes. Um, thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. This was very encouraging. And the next chapter is called Encouragement. So, I love this stuff. So, and it's a big chapter, but it looks like that a lot of the verses are short verses. So the number of pages may not be as great. The verses aren't as long as the ones that we just read. So it'd be good if you can read it in preparation for our next meeting next week. So, okay. Bernie, would you do a dedication for us, please?
Okay, let's get the prayer book out. Turn to page, let's see, which page is it? There we go. Okay, Kagyu lineage dedication prayer, page 33.
Okay.
Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma, Lord Gampopa, Pagmo, Drupa, and Lord Drikungpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve omniscience by defeating all enemies confusing. May all who travel in the ways of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara. Buddha Chitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn may it arise, where it is born may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have a long life. I pray that your Dharma activity spread far and wide. I pray that he may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samanta Bhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the merit of the Buddha has attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth and the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. And we'll leave it there, and we'll do the Om Ahong, I suppose. Om Ahong, Om Ahong, Om Ahong. May my body, speech, and mind be inseparable from all the enlightened beings of the past, present, and future, for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Okay.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you, Kunga.
Thank you, everybody.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Somebody wrote a chat. I'll see what that is.
Goodbye.
Oh. All right. Thank you.